The auctioneer hit the gavel while a deputy taped a foreclosure notice to my stilt house door. My door, like I was already gone. Saltwind snapped the paper, and Marla Vane stood behind him in a bright blazer, smiling like she'd rehearsed my ruin. 1 week of unpaid fines, she said, and the HOA takes title. I held up my storm repair receipts and the bylaw page she'd ignored, but her attorney didn't even glance at them. Then my phone buzzed one email from the county recorder. This easement was filed last month by someone using my name. Marla Vane didn't introduce herself. She issued orders. Unlock the gate, she told the marina attendant, already snapping photos of my dock, like evidence she owned. In the next breath, she waved a clipboard and announced an inspection failure, citing a railing I'd repaired after the storm. No greeting, no question, just control delivered with a practiced smile. She wore a blazer too crisp for salt air and heels that sank into planks she'd never fixed. Behind her, an HOA contractor measured pilings that weren't his to measure. Architectural harmony, Marla said as if the tide obeyed bylaws. She posted a violation notice on my piling and set the fine at $125 a day, then added almost casually, non-payment converts to lien automatically. I told her my dock predates the association. She didn't argue. She tapped her phone and replied, "Our counsel disagrees, like the past could be overwritten by a text." One sentence, one motive: she needed revenue before the annual audit, and it showed in the speed of her pen. When I asked for the ledger, she laughed once. Members don't review finances. When I asked for a hearing, she said the board had already voted, without dates, without minutes. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Settle now. Auctions are messy." As she walked away, her contractor kept shooting photos framing my nameplate, my cleats, my ladder. That's when I noticed the timestamp blinking on his camera today and realized Marla wasn't enforcing rules. She was manufacturing a record. The friction started small and sharp, the way sand finds its way into gears. The next morning, bright orange tags dangled from my crab trap's unauthorized storage, as if blue crabs needed permits. An HOA volunteer I'd never seen before stood on the pier, taking notes, avoiding my eyes. When I asked who sent him, he said the president, and pointed toward the road, like she might materialize on cue. By noon, Marla's enforcer blocked my truck at the marina gate, claiming my sticker was under review. I idled there while neighbors squeezed past, heat climbing the tide, slapping pilings in a steady mocking rhythm. He finally waved me through with a smirk and a warning compliance windows closing. That afternoon, a violation notice appeared on my dock. No signature, no date citing visual inconsistency. I photographed it in place, then photographed the empty spot where it had been an hour earlier. When I called the HOA number, it rang once and went dead. I sent an email anyway attaching storm repair receipts and the bylaw paragraph that allowed emergency fixes. No reply. The pattern repeated without repeating itself. A clipboard here, a camera. There a neighbor whispering that fines were adding up. I started documenting everything timestamps witnesses certified mail, because every move felt designed to look accidental while quietly building a case against me. That night, I stood on the dock and rang the old bell my dad hung here years ago, the sound carrying across the water, and wondered why a board obsessed with harmony was so eager to start a war. The system didn't knock, it arrived by certified mail. A thick envelope stamped "Final Notice" landed on my kitchen table, announcing that daily fines had begun retroactively. Not tomorrow, not after a hearing, already. The letter cited sections of the bylaws I knew by heart and skipped the one that required notice and a vote. At the bottom, a line in bold warned that unpaid balances would convert to lien without further action. I went to the HOA office and found the door locked during posted hours. A camera watched me instead. When I emailed a records request ledgers, minutes inspection logs, I got a template reply. Within minutes, members are not entitled to financial review. That was new and wrong. 2 days later, a board inspection showed up unannounced. 3 people matching polos measuring tape out. They claimed my dock crossed common area, a phrase that meant nothing until it meant everything. I asked where that boundary was recorded. One inspector shrugged. The map's internal. I sent a certified dispute letter the same afternoon quoting the bylaws and requesting a hearing within 10 days. The receipt came back signed. The hearing never did. Instead, another letter arrived saying the board had already voted to uphold the violations. No dates, no names, no minutes attached. Neighbors started stopping me at the marina, voices low. They'd gotten similar letters. Same tone, same urgency. One said her fine doubled overnight after she asked questions. Another said the treasurer wasn't available anymore. By the end of the week, the balance hit 4 figures. I realized this wasn't Marla freelancing. The HOA machine was fully engaged, letters, cameras, silence, and it was moving fast, counting on paperwork and fear to do the work for it. The real damage surfaced when my lawyer pulled the title report and went quiet. Buried between routine filings was a brand new easement recorded last month granting the HOA access across my dock. It was stamped clean, indexed neatly, and absolutely impossible. I'd never signed it. No notice, no consideration, no survey attached. The kind of paper that looks legitimate until you ask one question too many. Then came the notary. The commission number on the easement belonged to someone whose license expired years ago. The witness address pointed to a mailbox store 2 towns over. By the time we finished the call with the recorder's office, the lien balance had jumped again. Interest, penalties, administrative fees. The total crept past $18,000, and the letter scheduling a foreclosure auction followed like it had been waiting in a drawer. That's when the fear hit hard and clean. Losing the dock meant losing the house. Losing the house meant losing the last thing my father left me. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the tide chart and felt the room shrink the way it does when the math turns against you. The motive snapped into focus when a neighbor forwarded a screenshot from the HOA portal. A budget line labeled dredging reserve. There was no dredging. Another line for security patrol. No guards, no contract. Money was coming in fast, and something else was bleeding out faster. Marla wasn't enforcing rules. She was feeding a clock. Every fine accelerated the lien. Every lien made an auction easier. Every auction promised to reset new owner, clean title, no questions about old ledgers. The easement wasn't about access. It was leverage. By sunset, the foreclosure notice was taped to my door. 7 days. I could hear the dock bell outside tapping in the breeze and understood the play at last scare me into paying or erase me quietly. Either way, the money kept moving, and Marla needed it to keep moving now. The pressure turned official the moment the county recorder called back. She didn't accuse, she asked questions, and that was worse. Who requested this filing? Where's the survey? Why is the notary inactive? Each pause stretched heavy with implication. By the end of the call, she'd flagged the easement for review and forwarded it to compliance. Not a win, a crack. My lawyer warned me what came next would cost. $350 an hour. Letters, motions time. I mortgaged my skiff and paid the retainer because the auction clock didn't care how righteous I felt. We sent a demand letter alleging wrongful lien and ultra-vires enforcement, board actions beyond their authority, and requested immediate suspension. The HOA responded with silence and another invoice. State Consumer Affairs entered the picture 2 days later after a complaint from a neighbor. They requested financials and contracts. The HOA asked for an extension, then another. The treasurer resigned. The board posted a notice blaming vendors and promising transparency soon. Meanwhile, code enforcement showed up not for me, but to verify the HOA's claims about common areas. They walked the dock, measured, photographed, and left without comment. That night, my lawyer forwarded an email from the county preliminary irregularities confirmed. Marla reacted by tightening the vise. A courier delivered a notice accelerating the lien citing risk of dissipation. The balance jumped again. Foreclosure was still on the calendar. I stood in the courthouse hallway with a stack of stamped papers and the hum of fluorescent lights, realizing the system doesn't move fast, it moves decisively once it starts. Authorities don't shout, they document, and somewhere between a flagged easement and a missing ledger, Marla had crossed from bully to liability. The question wasn't whether the pressure would break something, it was who it would break first. The point of no return arrived the morning the ledger screenshots hit inboxes across the neighborhood. Not rumors receipts. The former treasurer sent them from a throwaway address, monthly dues, streaming in line items, labeled reserve security dredging, and then the transfers out, same day, same bank, same destination. Marla's name. Over and over. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Residents gathered at the marina in knots, comparing notices, balances, threats. Someone projected the screenshots onto a boat canvas. Another neighbor read aloud the bylaw section Marla kept skipping. Anger replaced fear. Questions turned sharp. I forwarded everything screenshots the flagged easement, the inactive notary to the county recorder and state consumer affairs, then emailed the board, demanding the auction be pulled pending investigation. No reply. Instead, Marla escalated. A courier arrived with a pre-auction stipulation offering to resolve my fines if I wired a reduced sum that afternoon. The message was clear: pay quietly or be erased publicly. I declined and sent the offer to my lawyer, who forwarded it to the state. Minutes later, the HOA posted a notice moving the auction earlier sunrise tomorrow. That night, neighbors canvassed door to door. Attendance notices flew. Someone leaked the agenda for the emergency meeting Marla had scheduled at the community center. Financial updates fee increases security concerns. The treasurer texted me one line: she's panicking. At dawn, I blasted a single email to every homeowner. I had an address for documents, attached timelines. Summarized auction time listed. Show up. The marina filled before breakfast. Cameras appeared. The county's compliance officer confirmed receipt. A state investigator replied, "Do not proceed." Marla called once, straight to voicemail. Her final text read, "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." She was wrong. The system she'd leaned on was now watching neighbors were standing together, and the auctioneer was warming up his mic. The next move would happen in public, and it would end someone's control forever. The courthouse steps buzzed like a nest kicked too hard. The auctioneer tested the mic, cleared his throat, and called my address first: sharp, official, irreversible. A deputy held the file at chest height, while the crowd pressed closer phones. Up whispers, rippling. I stood one step below the podium, hands empty, heart loud, watching Marla arrive through the side door, with her attorney chin lifted like the day was already hers. Lien sale pursuant to the auctioneer began. Objection, I said, loud enough to cut the echo. The word stalled him, mid-syllable. Cameras swung. The county clerk stepped forward, papers in hand, murmuring to the deputy. The crowd leaned in as if gravity had shifted. Marla smiled thinly and shook her head, tapping her watch. Proceed, she said, to no one. And everyone. Her attorney whispered, urgent now. The clerk raised her voice. This filing is under active compliance review. A murmur swelled. The auctioneer hesitated, eyes darting between podium and papers. Marla's smile flickered just once, then hardened. She reached for the mic as if to take control. Behind us, more people poured onto the steps holding printouts, screenshots, ledgers. The air tightened. The gavel hovered. Sir, the auctioneer said, unsure, are we clear to continue? I met Marla's eyes and didn't blink. No, I said, and I can prove it right now. The clerk didn't argue. She presented. She handed the auctioneer a stamped affidavit from the recorder's office and spoke into the mic. The easement underpinning this lien was recorded using an inactive notary commission. The filing is flagged as irregular and subject to reversal. Gasps cut through the crowd. I stepped forward and held up a single page. Here's the notary verification, I said. Commission expired 3 years ago. Cameras zoomed. Marla's attorney reached for the document, then stopped when the clerk shook her head. Phones lit up as neighbors opened the attachments I'd sent at dawn. Screenshots spread hand-to-hand ledger lines, highlighted transfers circled. Dues in, same-day transfers out, same name. Someone read the totals aloud. Another shouted the missing services. The murmurs became a roar. The auctioneer raised his hands. Order? He looked to the deputy, then back to the clerk. We can't proceed on a disputed instrument. Marla leaned into the mic, voice sharp. Those screenshots are fabricated. This is harassment. She scanned the steps, hunting for support that didn't come. The former treasurer pushed through the crowd and held up her own folder. I kept copies, she said, steady. 3 years of them. She turned to the clerk. I'll attest. The clerk nodded once. Please do. Marla's attorney whispered again, fast, frantic. Marla shook him off and stepped closer to the podium, jaw tight. This is a financial discussion, she snapped, not a venue for theatrics. The recorder's affidavit fluttered in the breeze. The auctioneer lowered the gavel to the stand and looked out over the steps. Given the evidence presented, he said, voice carrying this sale is paused pending review. The word paused, hit like thunder. Marla's face drained, and for the first time she stopped smiling. Marla grabbed the mic before anyone could breathe. This is an abusive process. She snapped words, tripping over each other now. I run a community? You can't just... Her voice cracked sharp and loud, and the crowd felt it. She glanced at her attorney, then back at the steps searching for authority that had evaporated. A state investigator stepped forward and spoke calmly. Miss Vane, we're seizing HOA records for audit. 2 officers moved in behind her, boxes ready. The clerk requested the ledgers, contracts, bank statements, all of it. Cameras caught Marla's hands shaking as she clutched her folder like a shield. Those documents are privileged, her attorney said too late. Not under a flagged filing and suspected fiduciary breach, the investigator replied. The deputy took the file from Marla's grip. She tried to protest words, tumbling into accusations, then into silence when the officer read the notice aloud. The auctioneer set the gavel down. Sale halted, he announced, indefinitely. Marla stared at the crowd neighbors, who wouldn't meet her eyes, residents holding ledgers she'd never meant them to see. Her control collapsed in real time, a public unraveling with nowhere to hide. As investigators carried the boxes toward the courthouse doors, the dock bell rang from the marina below, once clean and final. The courthouse hallway filled without anyone calling it. Neighbors pressed in from the steps, voices overlapping the air, buzzing with relief and anger at once. A couple apologized outright. We should have asked questions sooner, while others turned on the remaining board members, demanding answers they couldn't give. The board stood against the wallpapers, limp in their hands, suddenly ordinary, suddenly unsure. One woman held her phone up, ledger, still open, and said my name, like she needed permission to speak. We paid every month, she said, voice shaken. We trusted you. A board member started to explain, stopped, then nodded. I'm sorry, he said, and it sounded real. Another admitted she'd never seen a contract. A third whispered that she'd been told not to look. Someone laughed, short-stunned, and the tension broke. People hugged. A man clapped me on the shoulder and said, You didn't just stop the sale. You stopped all of it. The county clerk passed through with a cart of boxes, and conversations hushed as if a storm had moved on but left its mark. In that narrow hallway with fluorescent lights humming and the echo of the halted auction still hanging, the community shifted. Fear drained away. Accountability took its place. And for the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders drop, the fight easing, not finished, but finally facing the right direction. My lawyer put his phone on speaker and held it up like a verdict. The voice on the line was steady official. The recorder has voided the lien as defective, he said, and the hallway went quiet. The easement is invalid on its face. Sanctions are being filed for wrongful lien and ultra-virus enforcement. A ripple moved through the crowd, hands over mouths, a few sharp exhales. One whispered, Thank God. He continued without pausing. The state has ordered a full forensic audit of the HOA's finances effective immediately. All collection activity is suspended. No fines, no fees, no sales. The words, stacked cleanly, irreversible. A board member slid down onto a bench and covered her face. The lawyer added numbers, then the kind that finally end arguments. The lien balance reduced to 0 recorded. My costs recoverable, deadlines set. He read the order aloud while the clerk confirmed each line with a nod. Someone started recording again, but it felt unnecessary now. The system had spoken. I asked one question. My home secure, he replied. Title intact. People clapped, then stopped, unsure if clapping belonged in a courthouse. The investigator passed by and said, Audit begins today like a promise. In that same hallway without a single door closing or scene changing, the fight tipped from survival to consequence, and it tipped for good. Someone near the window played a short video on their phone, the dock bell swaying in the breeze, ringing once. It cut through the hallway noise like a breath finally taken. People smiled without meaning to. The investigator nodded and said, That'll do? As if the sound marked the end of something heavy. Right there, leaning against the same wall, where the board had stood minutes earlier, neighbors organized. No speeches, no ceremony. A clipboard appeared, an emergency vote permitted under the bylaws, circulated hand to hand. The motion was simple and sharp. A lien cap. No fines without a hearing. No liens without a supermajority automatic audits every quarter. Names filled the page fast. The clerk witnessed. The investigator watched. The system this time stayed. Apologies turned into plans. Someone volunteered accounting software. Another offered pro bono review. Until the audit finished. A woman said she'd host the first open meeting. The board members who remained signed last quiet and relieved to be corrected rather than protected. I stood there, listening to the hum of lights and the scratch of pins, feeling the fight drain out of my hands. The hallway hadn't changed, but everything else had. The bell rang again from the phone, steady now. Not a warning, just a marker. We didn't cheer. We didn't need to. We checked the paperwork, stamped it, and moved on, because HOA power only works when nobody checks the math.
Looking back, the win wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was realizing how easily this could have gone the other way if I'd let anger drive the wheel. There were moments when it felt personal enough to justify lashing out, proving a point, forcing a confrontation. But that's not what changed the outcome. The only reason my home and my peace are still intact is because the response stayed grounded in the law. Paperwork, patience, and process did what shouting never could. There's a clear line I had to learn to respect. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean escalating. It doesn't mean cornering people or turning conflict into spectacle. It means drawing boundaries and holding them even when your pulse is high and the pressure is on. Evidence beats outrage. Process beats pride. The moment you cross into emotional or physical escalation, you stop being protected by the system you actually need on your side. What helped most was staying organized and observant. I kept records because it felt responsible, not strategic. I checked public filings because they were there to be checked. I brought professionals in when the situation outgrew neighbor-to-neighbor conversation. None of that felt dramatic in the moment. It felt slow, sometimes frustrating. But that steady approach created clarity when everything else was noise. Communities only work when people trust the rules enough to follow them and care enough to question them when something feels off. Power, especially in places like HOAs, doesn't usually look dangerous at first. It looks administrative, routine. That's why it needs oversight, not hostility. When the dust settled, I went back to the dock and rang the old bell once. Not as a celebration, just as a marker. A reminder that calm persistence can carry farther than force, and that peace lasts longer when it's built the right way.